Very good. Fine. Okay, so are you able to see the slides now?
Yes, sir. It's okay now, sir.
Yes,
Very
sir.
good. Okay, so a very good morning to you all. I'm extremely sorry for inconvenience, first of all. So because of the very bad network, and there is a huge burden on network also. Because everybody, all students plus the school children, faculty, everybody is connecting to the same network. So it is getting out of access. Anyhow, I had to wait because all the school children have a classes from 9 to 11. So that's why I fixed at 11 o'clock. So today I'm going to take a 2 hours lecture, and I proposed another 2 hours lecture on Saturday, but unfortunately this Saturday is Diwali. So as Sagar told, so I want either pre-phone or postpone the Saturday class. So which is preferable to you all? What is the availability of you people
Sir,
tomorrow at 4 to 6?
sir, Patra sir was saying that you can take the Tuesday's MSDF class,
Tuesday, okay.
3:30 to 5:30.
Tuesday 3:30 to 5:30.
Yes, sir.
Monday, Tuesday. Okay.
So, sir, we BTechs are not good with that. We have classes then.
Yeah, that's true.
So, what about Friday, sir? Friday 4 to 6, as you were saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. I just want to take your opinion. What about
Sir,
tomorrow 4
sir, we
4
have
to
a
6?
lab. We have a lab class.
We have lab.
From how long?
Sir, it's till 5:30.
Oh, it's till 5:30.
Yes, sir.
What is that lab?
Sir, geotechnical only, sir.
But you supposed to have any class on Friday second half. It is allocated for only seminar. How can you have a lab?
No, seminar was today, na, sir?
No. Usually all Friday second half slots are meant for institute seminars.
No, we have a lab class, sir. 2:30 to 5:30 it is.
I don't know how come it is, because most of the BTechs also it is free second half. At least this is institute slot.
No,
Friday second half supposed
sir,
to be.
Patra sir takes that lab.
Okay. Anyhow, no problem. So then tomorrow is not possible. So then, but is it taking for 3 hours continuously?
Sir, it depends upon the type of test which we are doing on that day. Like if compaction is there, it takes more time. Plastic limit, liquid limit, then less time. It depends, sir.
But you are not doing any experiment, na?
No. The PhD scholar used to show us the video and explain us the test.
Okay. But even then, this is is it giving live demo or recorded one?
Recorded, sir.
Recorded, it will not take much time because I am also showing the same kind of videos to BTech
Sir.
students.
Generally, it gets over by 4:15.
Achha. So that let us try to meet at 4:30 tomorrow. Is it okay? 4:30?
So, it's okay with our BTechs.
Yeah, for BTech student it is okay. What about the MTech? 4:30, is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let us meet at 4:30. Let us see.
So, and also, so can you upload the videos in this Google Drive so that we can download them and have a look at?
Yeah, I will do so because of this poor network, I couldn't able to do so.
Yes,
I will
sir.
do
Because I
everything.
missed two to three classes due to this problem, so I will catch up on that.
Yeah, I will do it.
Yes, sir.
Because I'm at home. Because I'm at home quarantine, the network is very bad. I couldn't able to do. So it will be over by this Sunday. So Monday I'll be uploading all the lectures. Don't worry. By
Thank
Monday,
you, sir.
you will receive all recorded lecture series.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay, okay. Okay,
Sir, we
so
are
let us continue.
sir, we are free today after 4:30 also. So today also, if it is possible, you can take
After what time?
at 4:30.
At 4:30.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Manuraj, how about today 4:30? Manuraj, or
Yeah, we are good with it. We are good.
oh then, but I have a lab class today. So 2:30 to, yeah, 4:30 is fine.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So we'll meet at 4:30.
Sir, is there will be a 1 hour class or 2 hour class?
So let us fix for it because I want to finish it up this dynamic compaction today. So let us complete whatever the time it takes. So put tentatively approximately 1.5 hours. Okay, so everything is set. So today we'll be having another lecture series at 4:30 or 4:30 or around 4:45. So whatever the time it is, depending upon either 1 hour or 1.5 hours. Okay, so let me start another ground improvement technique. So this is one of the very simple and very effective economical ground improvement technique. So there are several ground improvement techniques. A few of them has been listed here. Dynamic deep compaction, vibro flotation, so vibro pair, compaction grouting, lime stabilization, and blasting. So today I'm going to talk about one of the kinds of in situ densification of the soil sample. So that is deep dynamic compaction. Now, to understand what is the meaning of deep dynamic compaction and what is its application, first let us try to recall what we did discuss during the previous class on the compaction. For example, if you look at the left side picture, so this typically represents the compaction. Now, when you talk about the conventional compaction, what normally we do, we always compact the soil layers in thin lifts or in so many number of layers. As we can witness from this simple picture, we will compact the soil sample in layers. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And we also aware that the thickness of each lift shall not exceed 300 millimeter or 400 millimeter. So that is one of the biggest limitation of conventional compaction when you do the compaction by using the rollers. Now just try to imagine if a 200 millimeter thick sample has to be compacted is the limitation, then suppose if you want to compact a 1 meter thick soil deposit, then you have to excavate whole lot of the soil sample and again replace in 5 number of layers or say 4 number of layers and compact each layer. So this is very laborious and very time consuming. Moreover, just imagine a requirement where you need to densify the soil sample up to a depth of more than 10 meter. Say, as you can see in this right side picture, I want to compact the soil sample at a time up to a depth of 10 meter or even behind the 10 meter. So then what shall I do? Because up to 10 meter, I can't take the rollers. So that is the biggest limitation, and I cannot even excavate the soil sample because excavation has another problem. So therefore, we need to have an alternative technique where if we apply some kind of energy at the ground surface, which transmits the energy to the deeper soil deposits and thereby densifies the soil at deeper level. So here the deep dynamic compaction is meant for such purpose. The dynamic compaction is one of the ground improvement technique, so which is mean to densify the soil sample at a greater depth, say 10 meters or 15 meters. So maximum that we can do is up to 15 meters, or in some literature we can also see up to 20 meters or even behind that one. But ideally it is effective up to 10 to 15 meters. So let us try to have a more details about what is deep dynamic compaction, how it works, and what are the different other dynamic deep compaction techniques, and what is its application. First of all, when you talk about the deep dynamic compaction, so this is valid only for sands or coarse grained soils. So I will explain the justification why it is valid only for sand in the subsequent slides. So here in this slide has been shown a couple of ground improvement techniques. So the top right side is vibroflotation. So here a vibrofloat, as you can see in this picture. So this is the vibrofloat. So this vibrofloat is driven into the ground up to the desired depth, and because of the vibration, where this vibrofloat vibrates and accentuates the vibration energy in the lateral direction, and thereby densifies the soil in the lateral direction, not in the vertical direction. Anyhow, so we are going to cover a full chapter only on the vibroflotation. So vibroflotation is one of the deep dynamic compaction test. So the vibroflotation can go up to hoping 60-meter depth, because it only depends upon how much depth we can able to drive the flow probe. This is the probe. So as long as we can drive the probe, that much depth of the soil can be densified. The second ground improvement technique is deep dynamic compaction. Here a heavy tamper having a large weight is used to densify the soil mass below the tamper. So this is the tamper. So this is the tamper. When you drop this tamper from a large height, you can see this is the height. So this is the height. So because of the potential energy, the soil below the tamper gets densified. So deep dynamic compaction is said to be effective up to a depth of 40 meters, but this is only tentative, as I told. Then another technique is dynamic roller compaction. This is relation of the dynamic compaction. In case of the dynamic compaction, a large weight of the tamper is dropped from a more height, say 10 meter or 20 meter. While in case of the impact compaction, so the tamper is integrated with the vibration energy or the impact energy, so as to densify the in situ soil. So the impact compaction is effective up to a depth of approximately 8 meters. Now we have a clear idea. Suppose if you want to do the compaction only the surfacial, then we can go for the conventional compaction. If you want to have a densification up to couple of meters, we can go for the dynamic roller compaction. Then if you want a little further, then we can go for the impact compaction. Then further we can go for the deep compaction, and further we can go for the vibroflotation. Now these are 4 variety of the ground improvement techniques. So as you can see here. Now, so these are the techniques. Now one point we understood is for different depths, we aware what kind of the technique should be adopted for. That is one thing. Now, the second biggest question is, can all these techniques are valid for clay soils and sandy soils equally? This is the biggest question. So to answer this question, so try to understand, vibroflotation is valid for sands, and similarly deep dynamic compaction is also valid for sands exclusively. These two techniques are valid for sands exclusively. impact compaction also valid for preferably sands, but may be able to be compacted the other soil types also, which are mixed composition of dominant with the sand. While dynamic roller compaction, so this is also valid for the mixture of the soil, not only for the sand. I hope it is clear to you all now. So vibroflotation is typically used for the sand. Deep dynamic compaction is typically used for the sand. Impact compaction preferably for sand, but for mixture of other soils also. Dynamic roller compaction, so for mixture of all other soils. So this is the details about the dynamic compaction. As we can see, this is a crane. So this is a big crane where this is called as a tamper. This is called as a tamper. And this is the height. So the crane is used to lift the tamper so to a particular height and drop it on the soil mass. Drop it on the soil mass. Now, this technique is first proposed by Louis Menard in the year 1960. So this is one of the ground improvement technique. So this ground improvement technique is implementable in case of the building foundations or the roads or the railway embankments. So in all these applications, the deep dynamic compaction is used. So this is one of the high energy compaction technique. So the high energy impact is caused by dropping of a tamper from a large height. So these are some details about the tamper. Dropping of heavy weight. So this is the heavy weight. So this is the heavy weight. What is the weight of this one? 100 to 400 kilonewton. So this is substantially high. 100 to 400 kilonewton. Then height is, we can lift up to a height of 5 to 30 meters, in the range of 5 to 30 meters. The lift height that depends upon what is the depth of the improvement that you are envisaging. If the depth of improvement is small, then we can lift only for the 5 meter. If the depth of the improvement requirement is significant, then we can go for higher lifts, say 30 meters. Then, as we can see, when this tamper is lifted and dropped, only a particular location of the soil sample gets densified. But what if I want to densify a large area? So then I have to follow some kind of a pattern. That pattern is called as a grid pattern. So preferably we follow a grid pattern of a triangular or rectangle. So depending upon the efficiency of the technique. So the dynamic compaction is typically used for weak soils or the poor soils where the bearing capacity is less, or where bearing capacity improvement is desirable. So this is the deep dynamic compaction. As you can see, this is the pounder or a tamper. So mass is 5 to 30 tons and drop height is 10 to 30 meters. When you drop this tamper, it is going to create some kind of the hole that is called as a crater. Crater. Now we can see this crater is created on in situ soil. On in situ soil. So meaning thereby, so the soil underneath the tamper is totally densified or compacted. So this technique is particularly well adapted for non-organic, non-homogeneous fields, ground reclamation areas, coastal terrains with sinkholes. So typically used for sandy soils, fill soils, man-made embankments, so on and so forth. Wherever you found a loose soil, there we can go for the deep dynamic compaction. However, the biggest limitation is this is typically valid only for the granular soil, not for the cohesive soil. So as I told, so normally when you go for the deep dynamic compaction, we follow a specific pattern. So here it has been shown in one of the linear way. So these red circles, indicate the gap left between the two impacts. So this is one impact. So this is one impact, this is second impact, third impact, fourth impact, and subsequent impacts. As you can see, the impacted area is designated with some kind of a triangle. So this is one triangle. So this indicates the transmission of energy from the ground surface to deeper levels. From the ground surface to deeper levels. As you go deeper and deeper, the energy transmits over wider area. So that's why it is in triangular form. So same thing we have seen in case of the consolidation also. As we assumed the spreading of the load in one horizontal to two vertical or whatever. One vertical to two horizontal. So this is the spreading of the area.
Sir, your voice is breaking, sir.
Energy. Now let us try to understand. So this is impact 1 and this is impact 2. Suppose if the impact overlaps, what happens? Or do we need to maintain a specific distance between one impact and another impact? For better understanding, you just try to see the overlap of one impact with the another impact. See here, this is zone 1 and this is zone 2. Zone 2. In zone 1, the energy transmission was only because of the impact number 1. While in the zone 2, the energy transmission is from the impact number 1 and impact number 2. So suppose if you compare the amount of energy between zone 1 and zone 2, so it is obvious that the zone 2 has undergone the more impact and thereby it can consolidate or gets compacted or gets densified higher than the zone 1. So if you do not properly design the spacing between the impact 1 and impact 2, so it may again create some kind of undulations on the ground surface in the subsequent time because of the discrepancy in amount of energy gets transmitted between the zone 1 and zone 2. So therefore, we need to have a minimum overlap of zones. For example, here it is a zone 2, minimum overlap, so that all the soil gets compacted uniformly. So this is one of the design criteria. I hope I could able to make you understand why do you need to maintain a space between the two impacts. So this is after densification. As you can see here, there's a formation of the huge crater. So to show you a little understanding the depth of the crater, you can see a person is standing on the edge of a crater. So the depth of the crater is usually more than the height of a man. So in fact, it is up to 1.5 to 2 meter depth of the crater, and the width depends upon the width of the tamper. The depth depends upon how loose the soil it is, but usually the depth is 1 to 2 meter within that range. And in the left side picture, as you can see, so many number of impacts followed in a particular grid pattern, maybe triangular or maybe square, depending upon your design requirement. So this is also followed a particular pattern. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. So depending upon the design, it is assumed that the soil, say here in between, so gets densified by receiving the energy from 1, 2, 3, 4 number of impacts. So therefore, what should be the optimum spacing between any two impacts? So that is one of the design parameters. So these are some advantages and limitations of the deep dynamic compaction. So it is particularly useful when the area is too large. Say if the area is greater than 5,000 square meter, it is most economical. Reduces the volume of the landfill or is fill material or waste material or the reclaimed soil or whatever it is. Reduces the volume. So the volume appears in the form of a crater. More craters means more reduction in the volume. So deeper is the crater means more is the reduction in the volume, or more is the densification. So increases in situ density and collapses the voids. So in fact, unless there is a collapse of the voids, there is no improvement in the density. So density and the removal of voids are interrelated. So since we talk about the compaction, we should explicitly understand that it is expulsion of air from the voids. It is not the expulsion of water from the voids. If it is expulsion, then that becomes the consolidation. So once density is increased, it is obvious that it also increases the bearing capacity. So reduces the post-construction settlement. So this is one fundamental thing you must understand with regard to ground improvement is the primary purpose of adopting to any ground improvement technique is there are two things. Suppose if the soil is a poor, having a very low bearing capacity, or where you found that the settlements are too large, what we do by adapting to ground improvement is we create a situation where by artificially imposing the load, we will enhance the settlements even before the construction of the structure. That's what we are doing here. When you drop a tamper of heavy weight, the crater created obviously indicates the amount of the settlement that can happen post construction. So what we are doing here, when you do the deep dynamic compaction, whatever the settlement that's supposed to happen after the construction is happening even before the construction. So that is the beauty of any ground improvement technique. Say whether it is a settlement or the consolidation. In fact, these are only the two. Or if there is a possibility of the slope stability or any other problem, say for example, collapse of the structure or subsidence, erosion, so on and so forth. We will artificially create such a conditions during the ground improvement so that post construction there is no subsequent settlement problem. So this is the fundamental thing in any of the ground improvement. Once you are understanding this logic, then you can understand whole of the ground improvement. So it is very effective to densify the loose and partially saturated fill with less than 15% fines. And suppose just imagine when you stand in the ground, you are not knowing is there any possibility of the weak soil at a particular depth or weak zones, normally what we call as a sinkholes at a particular depth. So when you go for the dynamic compaction, such a kind of the things can be detected, because so we are increasing the or we are impacting the ground with heavy energy or heavy compaction. So because of the such heavy compaction, so the structure collapses and thereby it creates or densifies the weak zone. So it is the another merit of deep dynamic compaction is we can able to detect the weak or loose areas, and then it can change a heterogeneous geomaterial to a more uniform, denser and stronger material. So once all the soil samples are compacted, there is no point of talking about the homogeneous or heterogeneous. So when it is compacted, everything comes to the same state of homogeneous. So generally less to not effective to improve the saturated clayey soils. Now let us try to understand why this technique is valid only for the sandy soils but not for the clayey soils. I think I have a slides, I will explain. And applications, the dynamic compaction applications are enormous. So this is particularly useful for the construction of the roads and even airports, heavy storage facilities like oil storage facilities, landfill sites, or reclaimed soils. So this is the fundamental mechanism of the dynamic compaction. So as you can see, when a heavy tamper is dropped from a particular height, So this creates an impact energy. First of all, impact energy. So this impact energy is because of the potential energy created from the heavy weight dropping from height. This is something like mgh. That is the potential energy. Now when there is an impact, sudden impact, which is instantaneous, so this creates a kind of a shock waves. This creates kind of a shock waves, which generates some kind of the waves. Since it is on the surface, as we know from your soil dynamics chapter, on the surface only two kinds of the waves can be generated: relay waves or love waves. Relay waves or love waves. In this case, they are relay waves. And you also know, as compared with the P wave or S wave, relay waves and love waves are very dangerous and more destructive. So they are more destructive of the particle structure. So when the shock wave is developed, this shock wave, when it is moving or transmitting from the ground surface to the deeper layers, it rearranges the particles because of the impact energy. So that rearrangement takes place simultaneously in the vertical direction as well as in the lateral direction. So therefore, when there is a dynamic compaction, it is not only the soil in the vertical direction that gets densified, but in the lateral direction also. As we can see, the zone of influence. This semicircle indicates the zone of influence. The zone of influence. So this is the zone of influence. As you can see, the waves are moving in the lateral direction and the waves are moving in the vertical direction also. So the depth of, as you can see, the depth of the densification depends upon how big shock wave that you can able to generate. That is the first thing. Then the generation of this shock wave again depends upon what is the weight of the tamper and what is the drop height of the tamper. So these are the two things. Now just imagine when I apply a sudden impact on a clayey soil or on a sandy soil, what happens? So let us try to have some kind of a discussion over it. So can we generate some kind of a discussion on the sudden impact energy on sand, sudden impact energy on clay? Can anybody able to answer?
So due to vibrational energy, then in clay soil, formation of slurry can be formed there, but it cannot be done in clay soil.
Very good. So any other answer?
For excess pore water generation in saturated clays will be there.
Okay, very good. So pore water pressure, slurry conversion. Then any other logical answers? Come on, you should be able to answer all these things. So the more you discuss, the more you could be able to remember and understand the ground improvement technique. Yeah, if people are same tired of previous lectures or what? Anybody is there? Hello.
Yes, sir, you are audible, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not hearing from anybody. That's why I'm asking. Can we have some kind of a discussion on if an sudden impact energy is applied on sand, say dry sand or saturated sand, and clay, dry clay or saturated clay? Because these are the fundamental things one has to understand as a geotechnical engineer.
So due to sudden impact, undrained conditions will start prevailing in saturated clays.
Okay. See, first of
Sir,
all,
in
if I,
case of clay,
yeah. Please tell me.
will the mineral composition will change because of a breakage of a particles if we apply dynamic load?
Not exactly.
Okay.
Any other? Okay, suppose say I have taken a dry sand and if I apply impact energy, what will happen?
So this
What
get
if you
densified due to the
decrease?
displacement.
Displacement because of expulsion of?
Air or
Because, yeah, simple, straightforward. There is nothing great. So don't think here and there. Okay. So suppose when you apply impact energy on a dry sand, so it gets densified because of the expulsion of air. Okay. Now if it is saturated sand,
by the expulsion of water.
by dispersion of, it's not expulsion, rather it's not even dissipation also. They will move in the lateral direction. That's it. Now one thing you have to understand. When I talk about soil particle and water, sand and water are passive. There is no reaction. That's why sand will not hold any amount of a water. So when the impact energy is applied on a dry sand, so because there is no water, it is only the air. It comes out so easily from the voids. So therefore we can anticipate little bit more densification and more settlement. But same if it is a fully saturated sand, so the water could able to take some amount of the energy. But since water is passive to the sand particles, still there is a possibility of the densification. However, the degree of densification not equivalent to the degree of sand when it is in dry condition. Okay, that is one thing. So when it is a dry and when it is a fully saturated, so one thing can be expected, that is a kind of a liquefaction. But when it is in a dry, still liquefaction can occur. This is also something called as a boiling, sand boiling. So when it is in fully saturated, still liquefaction can occur because of the heavy impact energy, the water tries to come out in order to dissipate the energy. So there also the sand particles can get liquefied, but that is original liquefaction under fully saturated condition. In case of the dry, it is some kind of the sand boiling condition. But in case of the clay, there is an active interaction between the clay particles and water. So the water molecules will not get easily separated because they were held with the electrochemical forces. So we need some kind of external energy to get separate water molecules from the clay particles. So therefore, much of the energy is required only to separate water from the clay particles. So consequently, so the clay sample, instead of going the consolidation, they will turn into the slurry. There is another problem also. You look at the permeability value. The permeability of the sand is very high, while the permeability of the clay is very low, in the order of 10 power minus 7 centimeter per seconds. With such low permeability value, so we cannot anticipate the dissipation of the water. So therefore, the water is under highly tremendous amount of pressure, that is called as a excess pore water pressure. But this excess pore water pressure will not get easily dissipated. So as a result, so we can see a kind of a cracks when a impact energy is applied on clay soils, while less number of cracks can see in case of the sand, but more number of cracks can be seen in case of the clay material, because these cracks form because the water under very enormous amount of pressure, when it tries to come out, it literally shears the soil or it fissures the soil. So those fissures are called as a cracks. So this is the fundamentals behind the dynamic compaction in case of the sand, in case of the clay. And because of this low permeability, so the dynamic compaction is not valid for clay soils. Okay, now is it clear why the dynamic compaction is valid only for sand? It's not valid for the clay material. But people have already used and tried the effectiveness of the dynamic compaction on the clay also. And in that case, what is going to happen, we will see. So this is the fundamental thing. So one can anticipate. So during the dynamic compaction. So this is the graph. As you can see, so and you are increasing the applied energy with time. So this is dynamic compaction. So as you are increasing, so this is one number of blows, second number of blow, and third number of blow, or couple of number of blows at a particular location. So when you apply the energy, so there is an increase in the volume change. So as we can see here, the moment the tamper touches the ground, there is a possibility of the degree of liquefaction. And this is called as a elapsed time. So this small triangle, the rise indicates the tamping time, while rest horizontal line indicates the elapsed time. This is the tamping time and this is the elapsed time. So during the tamping time, there is a possibility of liquefaction, and during the elapsed time, there is a dissipation of excess pore water pressure. So you can see from this picture, so liquefaction occurs, but this liquefaction occurs, yeah, in case of the sand only. So this is a dissipation of generation of the excess pore water pressure. And as there is a dissipation of excess pore water pressure, there is an improvement in the bearing capacity. So this is subsequent to each impact. So this is the fundamental mechanism of the dynamic compaction. So when you apply the energy, there is a change in the volume. That change in the volume is attributed to the occurrence of the liquefaction, but this liquefaction is local liquefaction. Okay, because of the application of huge amount of the impact energy. So depending upon the kind of the soil that you are using, yeah.
Sir, in the previous graph of that bearing capacity, like when the first blow was given, then it reached to us bearing capacity of let's say some 150 kPa.
Yeah.
And then in the next blow, it will again going to zero. How, sir?
The logic is see in this case, this small rise indicates the impact. Okay, so
Yes,
this
sir.
is impact. What
Okay,
is
sir.
happening during the impact? Liquefaction.
Okay, sir.
Okay, what is
Yes,
going
sir.
to happen during the liquefaction?
All the shear strength will reduce to zero. Okay, sir.
Correct.
Okay.
So when there is a shear strength 0, can we expect any kind of bearing capacity?
No, sir.
Yeah, that's what exactly happened.
So at some point of time when these simultaneous tamping goes on, so bearing capacity goes to zero at the point of liquefaction and then again increase like that it's going on.
Correct.
Okay, sir.
So depending upon the soil type on which you are going to use the dynamic compaction, if it is a sand, it is called as a dynamic densification. If it is a clay, then it is called as a dynamic consolidation. So densification I just now explained. So impact by heavy tamper on undisturbed granular material immediately displaces the particles to a denser state. This is simple expulsion of air from the voids. Dynamic consolidation. So the theory was proposed by the Maynard and Boyce in the year 1975. So they tried to use the dynamic compaction on the saturated fine-grained soil. So by applying the so many number of blows, repeated number of blows. So here, when there is an impact, this in case of the clay cannot undergo the liquefaction. Rather, it can turn into the slurry. So therefore, depending upon the soil type, so the other phenomena can happen. So in case of the dynamic consolidation, there are 4 kinds of the phenomena will happen. Those are listed as compressibility of the saturated soil, liquefaction, change of permeability, and thixotropy. So the last one is the most important. The thixotropy means regain in the strength. This you must have understood in your soil mechanics. Thixotropy means regain in the strength with time under undisturbed condition. So during the impact, so it is obvious that there is a change in the permeability, because when a impact is made on the clay soil, the soil undergoes fissures. Through these fissures, water can ooze out. So when water is coming out, it indicates that the soil is undergoing the consolidation. So that is the fundamental principle of the dynamic consolidation. So there is a compressibility of the saturated soil. So the compressibility happens only when there is an expulsion of water, but that cannot happen immediately. So what immediately will happen is there is a generation of excess pore water pressure. And that pore water pressure keeps on dissipated with respect to the time. So when pore water pressure is getting dissipated, the consolidation obviously happens. Next, due to the impact, as I told, there are a formation of the fissures. Through these fissures, the water gushes out. When water comes out, the consolidation gets accelerated. While if you look at the soil condition before impact and after impact, before impact there were no fissures, but after impact the water comes out through the fissures. So therefore one can easily expect a change in the permeability. So the last one is thixotropy. So that is regain in the strength when the sample is kept in undisturbed soil condition. So this is specifically valid for clayey soils, not valid for, in fact, maybe valid for the sands, but not much. No, in fact, it's not valid. It is valid only for the fine-grained clays. So this is how, this is what is the difference of implementation of a dynamic compaction on sandy soils and on clayey soils. Now let us come to the design part or another understanding. So that is the mechanism. Yeah.
During dynamic consolidation, does the structure of clay also change?
Yeah, obviously. There is no structure. There is a complete destruction of the structure, and there is a new formation of the structure.
So does it go from flocculated to dispersed stage, or the structure breaks completely?
There is no breakage of the structure, because these are the clay particles now. Usually clay particles are very nanometers or micrometers. Usually no particle breaks, but even if it is a breaking, so they will be rearranged from flocculated state to dispersed state.
Right. So in case of dispersed state, permeability should reduce now. So it is increasing just because of the cracks.
Yeah, the permeability increase only because of the cracks.
Okay, sir.
Okay. But if you look at the permeability of the compacted soil after elapsed time, then that permeability is obviously much lesser.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So now we understood what is the mechanism of the deep dynamic compaction. Now how shall I understand that how much depth of the soil I can able to improve? That is designated as a factor that is called as a improvement depth, designated as DI, improvement depth. Now we have only two parameters here. We know the weight of the tamper, we know the height of the tamper. So therefore, the depth of the improvement should be proportional to the weight of the tamper and fall height. So these are the two things. So several people has made some analytical derivations, and they try to relate depth of improvement with the W into H. W into H, and they equated and introduced a constant called as a alpha. So this alpha is a coefficient. So this is coefficient of improvement depth. And this alpha is a function of the soil type. They found that the alpha should be a function of the soil type. So as you can see here, the different values of the alpha for different soil types in table 3 and given by different people. So for rockfall, alpha is 1. And for soil with unstable structure, it is 0.5. So silts and sands, 0.67. Purely friction sands, 1. So then fine sand, 0.65. Soft clay, 0.66. Loess, 0.55. Silty sand, 0.65. So clayey sand, 0.5. So there are several assumptions about this one. Different people have proposed different values of the alpha. I think it should be dependent on the gradational characteristics rather than the soil type. So it is better to correlate alpha with the fractions of the particles. Okay, so since these are the early efforts, they try to correlate with what type of the soil it is classified, and accordingly they proposed the alpha value. But subsequently attempts also made to come up with the different values of the alpha. So now one thing is clear. The coefficient of improvement depth is a function of the soil type. So this is clear, and this is simple equation one can use to determine what is the improvement depth based on the amount of the energy applied on the soil sample. So depending upon the type of the soil that you are dealing with, so the people have categorized the soil into 3 zones: zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3. So this zonation has been done based on the 2 parameters. One is permeability, next is plasticity index. So you can see zone 1, these are the pervious soils like coarse grained soils, gravels and sands, where the plasticity index is 0, non-plastic soils, and the permeability is very high, 10 power minus 3 centimeter per second. Zone 2 is semi-pervious soils. These soils exhibit the plastic behavior, where the plasticity index ranges from 0 to 8 and the permeability 10 power minus 3 to 10 power minus 6. Zone 3, that is impervious soils. So where the plasticity index is above 8 and the permeability is 10 power minus 4 centimeter per second, low permeability. So almost impervious soils. You can see what kind of the soils can fall under zone 1, natural sands and granular fills, and zone 2, semi-pervious soils, nothing specific, and zone 3, clay fills and natural soils. So this is how one can able to understand what do you mean by zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3. And the approximate ground subsidence that can be anticipated when you deal with the zone 1 soil, zone 2 soil, and zone 3 soil. So why dynamic compaction is required? This question is already attempted. So this the technique is to improve the bearing capacity, density, shear strength, the consolidation, so on and so forth of especially cohesive soils. So this technique is ideally meant for pervious soils, that is coarse grained soils, sands, fills, reclaimed soils of granular materials, so on and so forth. It also decreases the permeability and thereby reduces the liquefaction potential. So one thing you understood here is when we try to do the dynamic compaction, during the dynamic compaction itself, we are creating a localized liquefaction phenomenon within the soil mass. So therefore, once it is densified, it is anticipated that no more liquefaction could able to occur after the construction of the structure on that particular soil sample. So this slide talks about the suitability of the deep dynamic compaction in a very elaborative way. So all pros and cons has been listed in this slide. So the technique is most effective for coarse, free, drained, granular soils. So try to understand. It should be coarse grained soil. At the same time, there should be free drainage. That means the permeability of the soil should be very high. Whether well or poorly graded or saturated or not doesn't matter, but the material has to be coarse, free draining, granular soil. So cohesive soils tend to absorb the energy. So this energy is required to separate water molecules from the clay particles. So therefore, the much amount of energy is only used to separate the water molecules from the soil. The densification cannot happen. And such absorption of the energy limits the technique's effectiveness. Not recommended for clayey soil with high plasticity index, that is greater than 8, and high degree of saturation. So this is quite clear. So it is especially suited to compaction of the rock fills, because all rock fills are free draining materials. So therefore, the technique is highly effective for rock fills and gravels with boulders. And of refuse and waste tips. Refuse means, so once you have used the rock materials or the crushed rock, so this is called as a refuse or waste. And natural heterogeneous coarse soils. So in all these soils, so for all these soil types, the dynamic compaction is more ideal. Then alluvial clays, unsatisfactory, saturated very fine sands, and silty clays may not respond well according to permeability. Because in these soils, the permeability is very low. So therefore, there is a possibility of the generation of the excess pore water pressure, and the time required for dissipation of excess pore water pressure is very high. Alluvial clays, unsatisfactory results, not suitable. The most commonly treated soils are old fills and granular virgin soils. Soils below the water table are routinely treated. But however, these soils must be a coarse granular soils. So careful control has to be used to allow dissipation of the excess pore pressure created during the weight dropping. So this can develop in case of clay soils or saturated fine sands. In both the cases, there is a possibility of the development of the excess pore water pressure. However, the elapsed time in case of the fine sands is quite less, but the elapsed time in case of the clay is substantially high. So the groundwater table should be at least 6 feet below the working surface for the process to be effective. In organic soils, the dynamic compaction has been used to construct the sand or stone columns by repeatedly filling. So so this technique is not valid for the organic soils, but the dynamic compaction can be used to create other kind of structures in organic soils. So these are the elaborative description about the suitability of the dynamic compaction for different soil types. So this is another recommendation: expected improvement and required energy with the dynamic compaction. So this table is very important because so this can be taken as some kind of a guideline. So for example, you are dealing with the gravel and sand with less than 10% silt and no clay. So the expected improvement is excellent. The typical energy requirement is 2 to 2.5 tons feet per cubic feet. So these figures, so proposed by the different people depending upon the field data. Suppose you are dealing with the sand with the 10 to 80% silt, 10 to 80%, silt less than 20%, clay and plasticity index of less than 8. So these are called as a moderately if dry and minimal if moist. So the effectiveness of the technique is moderate if this soil is dry and minimal if it is a moist. The amount of energy required is slightly high, that is 2.5 to 3.5. Fine grained soil with the plasticity index of greater than 8, not applicable. We forgot about it. Landfill, excellent. So the amount of energy required is 6 to 11. Now try to, if you look at closely this table, as the particle size decreases, the amount of energy required is substantially high. So this is one thing is quite clear. So as the particle size decreases, the amount of energy required is high. So this you should remember, because once you become a geotechnical engineer, when you are trying to design the dynamic compaction, you should recall that the more is the final fraction, more amount of energy is required to compact the soil sample. And this is how the energy is calculated, though it is told typical energy required. How to calculate the energy? So this is drop height multiplied by the weight multiplied by the number of drops divided by the soil volume to be compacted. That is the zone of influence. Zone of influence. So this is quite easy to suppose if you ask to calculate the energy requirement for the standard or modified Proctor compaction, one can able to easily compact it. There we know the drop height of 1 feet, weight is 2.5 kg rammer, number of drops 25 divided by the volume is approximately 1000 cc. So we know total how much amount of energy that we are applying in case of the standard or modified Proctor. But when you go for the dynamic compaction, we do not know what is the volume that is going to be impacted. So this is based on the assumption. So this is based on the assumption. So these are the different stages. So first, prior to the commencement of the work, a granular blanket of 1 meter thick is placed on the treated area. So on the top of the soil to be treated. So the weight is dropped from a height of 25 meter with up 5 number of passes and up to 10 number of drops per pass. Okay. So here there are two things. One is number of passes and number of drops. At a particular location, it is not only the one drop. We can go for more than one drop. That is, multiple number of drops can be done at one particular location. And it is followed in a particular rows and columns pattern. So the rows in horizontal or length and width direction. So at the same location, again, you can come up and again, you can drop the height. Say, for example, here is an example. There are 10 number of drops are required at one place. So I can divide the 10 number into 5 passes. That means corresponding to each pass, 2 numbers. First, I can make one row. So at each location, I can go for the 2 number of drops. Then come again 2 drops, come again, and then again 2 drops. So this is one pass in 2 number of drops. On the first pass, the deepest layers are compacted. Following the completion of the pass, the site is then regarded. So during the initial passes, deepest soil layers gets compacted. Then subsequent passes compact the successively shallower layers, following which the site is regarded. And the final tamping pass is continuous to compact the soil at shallow depth. So that means if you look at the stage 1 to stage 4, so these stages indicate clearly 3 points. The first one is during the initial pass, the deeper soil gets compacted. During the second pass, the intermediate soil gets compacted. During the final pass, the top soil, so that gets compacted. Now, if you recall any of the previous slide, the soil between the craters, is always in a loosened state. So therefore, we need to level the ground so that all the craters are filled with the loosened soils. So the final pass is always meant to compact the leveled soil. So this is what is the meaning. So these are some knowledge about the deep dynamic compaction. So when there is a drop, you can see the formation of the failure plane and the zone of compaction. So this is the zone of compaction, and this dotted line indicates potential slip surface. So then this is the amount of stress strain that gets generated at different points. So point number 1, 2, this is 3, 4, 5. And this is the volume strain versus the permanent download displacement at point A. So this is the point A, and number of passes, what happens for different number of drops. So if you take the point A, and if you try to draw volume strain versus impulsive stress at point A, and volume strain versus permanent downward displacement at point A for different impacts. One number of blow, 2 number of blows at point A, 3rd number of blow at point A, 4th number of blow, and 5th number of blow. So this is how it looks like. So anybody can ask you how the dynamic compaction is distinct from the other consolidation process or the compaction process. So let us try to have a correlation between the consolidation and dynamic compaction. Suppose if you look at the left topmost graph, so this dark line indicates this is a routine consolidation that normally we do in the laboratory. Okay, so what we do, we progressively increase the load on the soil sample so because of the increase in load, there is a reduction in the void ratio. However, this is a progressive. This is not an instantaneous. But in case of the dynamic compaction, what we do is we apply the load instantaneously. As you can see here. So this is the sudden volume change because of the application of the heavy impact load. But if you look at ultimate, so both the soils are achieving the same state. When you resort to deep dynamic compaction or the consolidation, both ultimately has to reach the same state. So that's what is happening. However, the initial treatment that we applied is a bit different. The initial treatment is different, but the ultimate state that they are reaching is remain same. And this is the graph between the post compaction where the data has been collected from the different countries, and they try to see is there any difference from country to country. So they found that almost there is no difference. Almost all the soils are following the only one kind of a particular trend. So linear, then followed by sudden drop. So this is the ground pressure versus settlement as a function of the number of drops, settlement versus stress calculated from weight deceleration for different drop heights. So there is a settlement, there is a recovery. There is a settlement and there is a recovery. So this is depending upon the soil type. So there is a relationship between the depth of the improvement versus the amount of energy applied. So as we have seen in one of the previous slides, suppose if you try to correlate the depth of the improvement versus the amount of energy applied, that is WH. So the factor alpha, the coefficient of depth of improvement, is different for different soils. So this is how one can able to determine how the alpha is arrived that has been shown in the table. If you draw a correlation between square root of the energy applied versus the depth of the improvement. So if you draw a linear graph, the slope is nothing but the coefficient of volume, the coefficient of depth of improvement. So once the dynamic compaction has been done, then how to ensure that whether or not I achieve the desired density? How to ascertain this point? So in order to ascertain this one, then again we need to conduct some kind of a in situ investigation. But what kind of in situ investigation should we conduct? So that I'll be aware that the soil has reached to desired density. So one of the simplest techniques are we can go for SPT, that is standard penetration test, or cone penetration test, or pressure meter test. So the type of the test that you should conduct depends upon your requirement. Your requirement. Suppose if your requirement is only settlement, then you can go for SPT or the CPT. Or if your requirement is more of load bearing capacity, less of the settlement, then we should go for the pressure meter test. But so these are a few soil investigation techniques that should be done post dynamic compaction to ascertain whether or not the soil has been improved to the desired degree. So again, the list of the techniques, other techniques: deep penetration test, SPT, CPT, then compressibility estimates from penetration test, then stress strain modulus from the pressure meter test. Either you can go for the Menard pressure meter or self-boring pressure meter, or you can also conduct dilatometer test or shear wave velocity measurement test. So these are the variety of tests that can be conducted on site, which is subjected to deep dynamic compaction. So this is the response before and after the ground has been subjected to the dynamic compaction. As you can see here, so this is SPT graph, SPT profile as a function of the depth. So this is before compaction, after compaction. Before compaction, after compaction. You can see there is a huge increase in the values of the SPT. Similarly, CPT value, so before dynamic compaction and after dynamic compaction. Similarly, pressure meter test, so before compaction and after compaction. So this is how you should ascertain that the ground has improved to the desired degree. Because once we know the SPT value, once we know the CPT value or pressure meter, we can correlate these things with the bearing capacity and settlement. Thereby we can ascertain whether the compaction which was done is enough or not. So these are the device. This is self-boring pressure meter kit, and this is the response of the self-boring pressure meter kit. So this is the flat dilatometer, and this is the setup for shear wave velocity measurement. So these are the shear wave velocity measurements as a function of the depth. So this is before and this is the after. As you can see, there is a huge improvement in the shear wave velocity. So since the soil is remained same, the increase in the shear wave velocity indicates that there is an improvement in the density. Okay. So let us go to the design consideration. So before I go into the design consideration, so let me take a couple of questions from you all. What did you understand about the dynamic compaction? So if you have any questions, you are free to ask me now. Questions, please.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, you have told that the formula for the depth of the into root over of W into H.
Yeah.
Some slides.
Yes, yes. Correct.
Yes, so it is not dependent upon the number of the blows in that equation.
No, no, this equation is not dependent on the number of blows. Because your depth of the improvement is already default includes number of blows. Na? When you calculate the depth of the improvement, it has already default included how many number of blows you have done at that particular location.
But you have told that for the first phase, the deepest strata will be first improved, then in the second phase, intermediate, and the last phase, the above strata will be modified.
Yeah, that is true, but that's what exactly happens. That's what say, for example, at a particular location, you determine that 3 number of drops are required. Okay. Now there are two things.
Okay, sir.
In a first number of blow, can I able to get full depth of improvement? May not be.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what exactly happens is during the first drop, the deepest soil layer gets compacted. During the second drop, the intermediate soil gets compacted. During the third drop, the shallower soil gets compacted. That's what they reported. This is what is the observation. Now summation of all the three is the total depth of improvement.
Okay, then it should depend on the number of blows also, no, sir?
Yeah, it should depend on number of blows. That's what I'm saying now. When you calculate the depth of improvement, will you calculate only for the first number of blow or after 3 number of blows?
Okay, that is after the 3 number of blows. Okay.
That's what. Yeah, any other questions?
So, sir, number of blows is fixed at 3.
No. Number of blows is one of the design parameter.
So, if we increase the number of blows, depth of improvement will increase, right?
Obviously.
So, how is that taken care of in that situation? Alpha times root WH.
Yeah. So this is a beautiful question. Now let us try to understand. Suppose what happens if I apply 10 number of blows? What happens if I apply only 5 number of blows? Because the degree of improvement is fixed. Okay. Behind certain degree of improvement, whether you apply 10 number of blows or 20 number of blows or 50 number of blows, it is useless. Okay. So we have to give importance to what is the degree of improvement, whether that we achieved or not. Once we achieved the degree of improvement, we will curtail at that time only the number of required blows. Behind that, we will discard it.
So that means we will know what depth of improvement we require, and according to that
Obviously.
we'll plan the number of blows.
Exactly, because in reality, in the ground, we know the soil profile.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we know depending upon the type of the structure that you are going to build. So what for the stress increase can happen? Suppose if you draw the profile of delta sigma below the footing. So depending upon your isobar or pressure bulb, I know where the delta sigma is becoming 0.
Yes, sir.
Okay, it indicates that. So up to that point only depth of improvement is required. Behind that it is not required.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Now if we compare, my delta sigma is becoming 0 with the soil profile. I know at what depth it is becoming the 0.
Yes, sir.
Now in addition to that, suppose if I apply the dynamic compaction, say for example, this soil is going to undergo consolidation or the compaction of 1 or 2 meter, then add additional 1 or 2 meters.
For safety factor.
For as a safety factor.
Okay, sir.
You got the answer?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, good. So any other questions? You should ask more questions. See, the more the questions you ask, at least I will learn more and more. Okay, so this is the design consideration. The total energy required to compact a site from which the number of passes for a given equipment, time for completion are ultimately derived. That means either we have to assume or calculate the total energy required depending upon the soil type. So that means when you do any dynamic compaction, so you have to collect the soil sample from that site and try to assess whether it falls under impervious or semi-pervious or pervious. So as we know, depending upon the perviousness, how much amount of energy required. So we can take that much amount of energy. Then depending upon that much amount of energy, we can decide number of passes and the drop height, drop weight, so on and so forth. Okay, so then grid spacing also. Now, one important thing is that when you go for dynamic compaction, I have a mission with me. One thing you should understand. I have a mission with me. When I have a mission, I have a tamper with me. I know the weight of the tamper. Only thing I can fix is I can change the height of the drop. I can change the drop height, but I cannot change the tamper weight because that is fixed to a mission. So that means a couple of the parameters are fixed already. One thing is I know the tamper weight. Second thing, I know the soil type. So therefore I can able to decide the total energy requirement. The third thing is I know the depth of the improvement because I know the soil profile. Soil profile. This is the reality. But if you do examples, we will come in a reverse way. Usually in the class, we will come in a reverse way. So we will give the weight of the hammer and height of the hammer. Then I can able to calculate what is the depth of the improvement. That is simple. Okay, but in the reality, it is a different. I know the soil profile, so I can decide what should be my depth of improvement. So I know the weight of the hammer, so therefore I can able to calculate what should be the height required. What should be the height required? So this is the step one. So depth of the improvement is nothing but square root of alpha into square root of W into H. So W multiplied by the H is the energy applied on the ground. Step 2, from the side view, as you can see, this is a tamper geometry. So this is the side view where height is B and width is 2 times of A, and this is the top view where A is the radius of the circle. So this is the approximate shape of the tamper or crater. Both are same. Approximate shape of the crater. So from the side view, B is equals to depth of the improvement. B, this is the B. So your B is nothing but this is the total depth of the improvement. But this is not a tamper, so this is the different. So B is depth of improvement. This is an assumption. Where D is width of the hammer, if not circular in cross section. And A is area of the cross section of the hammer, and N is the number of blows required. Number of blows required. In step 2, assume B is, that is the depth of improvement, is nothing but DI, depth of the improvement. And this is the graph proposed by Oren and Rodriguez. So in the year 1992 to design the dynamic compaction. So this has a 3 parameters basically. On left vertical axis is B by D, where B is the depth of the improvement and capital D is width of the hammer. Width of the hammer. So we can also assume that your D is nothing but 2 times of A. D is, that is width of the hammer or diameter of the hammer, is nothing but 2 times of A. So on the right side, so this is A, that is the diameter of the hammer, and divided by D, that is width of the hammer. Sorry, radius by width or radius by diameter. And on the x-axis, so this is amount of energy applied, where n is number of drops or number of drops, W is weight of the hammer, and H is drop height divided by A is cross-sectional area of the hammer, and B is the depth of improvement. Depth of the improvement. Now here, I know the couple of the parameters. I know I did not know some of the parameters. So from the known parameters, unknown things can be decided. Unknown things can be decided. So this graph will be provided in the exam for design purpose. But I'm going to talk about two variety of design procedures. So this is a simple one provided by the Poren and Rodriguez. But I'm also talking about the another elaborative one. This is very simple one. So in the step 1, try to compute the depth of the improvement. In step 2, assume from side view B is equals to DI. B is equals to DI. Step 3, determine DI by D is equals to B by D. DI by D is equals to B by D. So once I know B by D, based on the step number 3, you try to draw some horizontal line. It is there. Okay. You try to draw some horizontal line corresponding to particular value of the B by D onto the B by D, and extend it onto the x-axis. Extend it onto the x-axis. So this will give you the particular value, but which is nothing but NWH divided by AB. Here only unknown parameter is N, that is number of drops, because I know the hammer, or I know, or I can assume the, in fact, H also unknown parameter, N is unknown parameter, H is unknown parameter, A is known, B is known. So for the known value from the x-axis, I can able to calculate N multiplied by H. N multiplied by H. Now I can further do is assume the drop height and calculate number of drops required, or vice versa, assume the number of drops required and calculate the drop height. So we can do anything. So this is the beauty of this graph. So in a step number 3, by assuming DI by D is equals to B by D, I can able to calculate the number of drops. So once number of drops is known, what is the remaining unknown? I want grid spacing. That is spacing. Step number 4, using the above graph, determine the value of NWH by AB from the magnitude of B by B. B by D. So I know the B by D. So as I told, draw a horizontal line from the left ordinate, extend onto the curve of average B by D, and project a vertical line onto the x-axis and pick the value equated to NWH by AB. Once equated, I can able to calculate capital N multiplied by H, the product of N into H. With the known value of NWH by AB, determine A by D and thus A from the chart. Again, what you need to do is, once I know NH product, assume number of drops, calculate drop height. Now what here happens is, when I calculate either N, capital N or H, it becomes some kind of the factor. Say for example, assumed height is 10 meter, and I may come up with say 2.3 drops or 2.5 drops. Then I can round it up to 3. Now once it has been rounded up to 3, again calculate NWH by AB. For that value, for the calculated value of NWH, draw another line onto A by D, and draw another horizontal line onto the right ordinate. Now here, when you extend onto the right ordinate, I will get a particular value. So this value is equated to A by D. So here D is known, that is width of the hammer. Only unknown is small a. So calculate the small a. So your small a is said to be the spacing. Small a is said to be the spacing. So the grid spacing SZ required for dynamic compaction may now be assumed to be equal to or somewhat lesser than A, that is SG. SG. So this is quite a simple procedure. Quite a simple procedure. So for demonstration purpose, please take a pen and paper. So try to solve this sum. So the following is a typical example. Weight of the hammer is 18.5 kilonewton. Height of drop is fixed as 26 meter. Width of the hammer is 5 meter. So then you need to determine the number of drops and the grid spacing. Number of drops and grid spacing. I better instead of showing this one. Just take a pen and paper. So try to design the number of spacing required and grid spacing required. So did anybody calculate what is the depth of the improvement?
So 10.9658.
Okay. So here one important thing is when you calculate depth of improvement, that is alpha value you can assume depending upon the soil type. So here no soil type has been mentioned. So you can assume any value of alpha as you don't know anything. But units are a must because this is an empirical equation. The relationship of di equal to alpha into square root of wh is empirical equation. So the units of w and units of h has to be maintained only in those particular things. I think w is in tons per meter or in tons and h must be in only meters. You cannot use no other units of here in this case. You can use your own units of W and H to follow whatever the said units. Depth of the improvement. Anybody?
.47.
So what in H mass is in kilonewton. So so the you need to make it. What is the value of the depth of improvement? So let me show you. So this is the final design. Depth of improvement is nothing but of square root of WH into H. Since the chart is used kilonewton per square meter, so same unit has taken for W. So therefore, depth of improvement is 10.96 meter. 10.96 meter. In the step 2, if you look at step 2, assume B small b into DI. Small b equal to DI. So DI is 10.96 meter, B is equal to 96 meter. And here D is 5 meter. So therefore, width are not given, but the shape hammer they are not given, whether it is circular or a square. So we can assume this is a square. So therefore, cross-sectional area is 20 meter. Cross-sectional area is 25 square meter. So I know the B, I know the D. So what is step 3? Determine D by D is equals to B by D. B by D. D by D to B by D. So B is 5. So that is 10.96 divided by 5. So what we get is 2.2. Now corresponding to 2.2, so this is 2.
Slides are not visible.
Draw a horizontal line. Slides are not visible.
No, sir.
Yes.
No, sir, it's visible, sir.
You have a network problem.
No, sir, I cannot.
Solution,
Okay, so
solution which you are telling is not visible, sir.
So, yes, sir, I also cannot see the slides.
Only problem we can now it's visible, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So let us see. From the step 1, calculate the depth of improvement. So you know the equation, that is of square root of W into H. So depth of the improvement is nothing but 10.96. So in this graph, the x-axis is in kilonewton. So therefore, maintain the same units of W. So the depth of improvement is calculated as 10.96 meter. In step 2, so assume B equals to DI. B equals to DI. So therefore, DI is 10.96 as calculated from the step 1. So then D has been given as 5 meter, but shape of the hammer has not been given. So assume it is square. So cross-sectional area is 5 by 25 square meter. So step number 3, so calculate, determine DI by D is equals to B by D. So B assumed as DI, that is 10.96. Then D is diameter of the diameter or width of the hammer, that is 5 meter. So 10.96, that is 2.2. 2.2. So corresponding to this 2.2, say this is 2.2, draw a horizontal line onto B by D, and drop a vertical line take a line onto the x-axis, Pick up the value, that is approximately 220. Pick up the value. So that is approximately 220 kilonewton per square meter. Means now I know that NWH by AB is 220. NWH by AB is 220. Now here I know everything. I know WH is 18.5, H is 26 meter, A is 25 square meter, B is 10.96 meter. So only know is N, capital N. So substitute everything and calculate the number of drops. So it has been calculated as 14 number of blows. 14 number blows. So this point is clear to everyone now? Okay.
Sir, how the
Now suppose this may not be 14 exact. So if you look at this equation now, NWH by AB is equals to 220. Here except N, everything is known.
Sir, it's coming around 125.
125.
Yes, sir.
Just modify the units of W once. Because 125 cannot be the number of drops. So when you calculate, what is the units of the W you are providing here?
7 kilonewton, 18.5 kilonewton. That means it's just 1.8
Suppose if you
ton.
take in tons, if you take in tons, others, please confirm whether or not you are getting the 14 number of blows.
Sir, 14 is not coming.
What is the number you are getting?
Sir, if W is in kilonewton, then the same 125 is coming. And if it is taken in tons, then it is coming very much, 1250 around.
Oh my goodness. This is 200. Where is the mistake there?
Sir, if we take the WH as 18.5 ton, then the depth of the improvement will also change.
Okay, so there is something wrong. I don't know. That's what. So first of all, whether this units and this units. Okay, so okay, one thing. Suppose the weight of the hammer is 18.5 ton. Okay, so consider 18.5 ton. Then the step number 1 is correct, because as per the previous equation, it should be in ton. As for this equation, the WH must be in metric tons. That's satisfies. So here what you do is you substitute, convert 18.5 tons into kilonewton. one more thing. 14 number of blows. Yeah. So
Yes,
what
sir. So
will we
in
get?
that case,
18.5 ton when you convert it.
sir, then it is coming
12.
instead of 40, it's at 12.5, 12.54.
No issue. How does it matter? So what you are getting is 12.5.
Yes, sir,
12.5.
12.5 it is coming.
Okay. Fine, very good. So what you are getting is 12.5. Okay, so make a correction, everyone. So let me make it here only better. So please cut it to 18.5 ton. Okay, first of all, 18.5 ton. Then everything is in line. So you are not getting 14 number of blows, rather you are getting 12.5. 12.5 blows or 12.5 number of drops. Okay, very good. Now the question is, we can't apply 12.5. Either we can assume we can round it up to 12 or we can round it up to higher number. So therefore what we do is to round it up to 13. Round it up to 13. Now I round it up to 13. So obviously the entire product of NWH by AB will change. Instead of 220, it will become some more value. Some more value. So therefore, assuming number of blows as 13, again calculate NWH. Again calculate NWH. Okay, say for example, this is 250. Can we calculate assuming n is 13? What is this entire product value? NWH by AB.
Then
Assuming
it is 228, sir. Instead of 220, it is 228.
Okay, no problem. So 228. Okay. Now corresponding to 228, draw a vertical line, draw A by D curve, and from there draw another horizontal line. Draw another horizontal line. So here I can pick up another value. I can pick up another value. So that is approximately say 1.2. 1.2. So that is small a by capital D is 1.2. 1.2. So what is the value of small a? That is 1.2 multiplied by 5. So that is the spacing. So this is 6 meter. It's not 16, it is 6 meter. So your grid spacing is approximately 6 meter. So this is how you should use this graph for calculation of depth of improvement, number of blows, and grid spacing. So this is as simple as possible. So I will stop it here. So we may meet again at 4:30. So then we can discuss about another way of designing the dynamic compaction.